Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Alexander, and I'm the head of AI Innovation and Transformation at CrossCountry Consulting, one of our partners and a partner in our business transformation practice as well. We are so excited to bring this podcast to you today. This is our inaugural podcast on AI transformation and how we're helping our clients in the market, what we're seeing, what the trends are out there. And what we're seeing is a future where, and we always kind of paint this North Star for our clients, it's of the command center. You know, imagine a world where you can monitor your agents, you can monitor your controls, you've got your KPIs on the board, you've got a flashing red light that tells you when your policies are being violated and controls are kind of going off the rails. But there's so much foundation that needs to go in place for you to be able to get there and get to that command center concept. So that's our tee up, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those concepts today. But with that, Cameron, I would love for you to introduce yourself because you have an amazing background, as so many people at CrossCountry do. But I find yours particularly unique as we're thinking about the problem to solve here. So welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm excited to be on the inaugural edition of what I'm sure will be a long history of great podcasts. As Tom mentioned, my name is Cameron Over. I'm a partner in CrossCountry's risk advisory practice. I'm also our cybersecurity national lead as well. So work with a lot of clients across some of the things you touched upon, Tom. A lot of advanced technologies coming to clients, the cyber risks, the privacy, data protection risk, as well as the opportunity that each of those can present to clients if done well. All of our clients are talking about both the opportunity and the risk with AI. So it's such a massive shift, I think, in the conversation around the world. You can't turn on the TV and not hear about it. And so I think between our two parts of the world, there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate, even this morning, in talking with a client about AI opportunity as well as cyber and other risks. So I'm excited to be here.
So I'm just thinking about, one of our common buyers is the CFO. And the CFO is responsible for internal controls around financial reporting, getting the financial statements out in an accurate way, getting those out timely. A lot of times now we're seeing them work very closely with the CIO and kind of balancing digital transformation, owning some of those programs, trying to drive ROI through there. But the responsibility is still on them to make sure the reporting is controlled, the budget doesn't get out of control with some of the AI spending, the regulations are being monitored, and keeping everything under control from that lens. So what do you think is the biggest challenge that CFOs are facing from the standpoint of building some of the foundational governance or just risk management programs in general?
Yeah, I would say the top risk is probably, and we're hearing this from clients every day, is that they are trying to operate at the speed of business while a lot of regulations and a lot of systems and technologies are still not fully understood. And so everyone is racing to try to harness the opportunity and potential of AI. And they're doing it at a pace that is lightning fast, and regulation, frankly, is not even caught up yet. And so it's a matter of trying to crawl, walk, run, if you will. So how do you get started to try to understand what the opportunities are, but also understand what those, the counterbalance of risk, and making sure that that's in alignment with the organization's risk appetite, their regulation, the compliance, kind of all the elements that need to maintain in balance in order to both achieve the value, but also not take on undue risk.
So AI is one of those things, and you just said it there, it's one of those things where you need to go slow to go fast. And part of that is kind of some of the foundation that we're talking about setting here. So when we talk about our framework and what we've talked to clients about, it has been very much about setting that foundation before you even get into the design, the roadmap, the iteration, the testing. So value alignment, what's the measurable outcome? What are the KPIs to measure this program in general, or even just picking, the use case or the end-to-end process that you're prioritizing to go after, which leads us into kind of the foundational components of what you need to have in place. And that's around data governance, it's around risk and governance frameworks, it's around just your operational readiness. Do you have a funnel concept? Do you have a command center that is looking at prioritizing the use cases, connecting the dots across value streams? Really, creating an end-to-end transformation program that should not be disconnected from your digital transformation program in general. So Cameron, any reaction to all of that as you think about setting some of the foundation?
Yeah, I think most of our clients have already dipped a toe into the world of AI in some form or fashion. So I also think it's important to meet clients where they are. So maybe some are already working in financial models and they're already leveraging certain LLMs or other tools and technologies to benefit them. And then I think another component is the appetite for building something large scale or kind of starting smaller or with certain use cases and proving those out, making sure that you have the appropriate controls and governance structure in place to both harness that opportunity, but also not kind of paint yourself into a corner or create a lot of risk, both financially, reputationally. Certainly there's opportunity for models to hallucinate. I mean, the list of potential risks goes on and on. I certainly won't bore the viewers with what all of them are, but another component, of course, are the threats. So there's the risk of what could happen, but there's also the threats or examples where some of these risks have become a reality. And so I think third-party risk, for example, is key, like which vendors are already using AI, perhaps that are, clients or customers are not aware of, making sure that you are putting the trust in the right partners as you're building these programs, as you're scaling technologies, but making sure also that you have the right stakeholders at the table, because it's certainly not just the CFO who are making these decisions. They're relying on a lot of other stakeholders in this journey and making sure they bring those folks to the table. And I guess one other point would be making sure that, ultimately one person has to be accountable for AI risk, right? And that's a big question. We're seeing kind of who is it that is owning that responsibility? And in some cases it is the CFO ultimately. In other cases it's a different stakeholder. So I think that's another piece to consider as well.
So Cameron, you just brought up, the concept of ownership, and you are so right in that we are seeing various C-suite owners own this program. We've seen CISOs, we've seen CIOs. I can't have a meeting with a finance team without the CIO and the CISO being there. Internal audit is jumping into these meetings. And I think it really just highlights the concept that is AI is an enterprise program. Many of the clients that we're talking to are really just looking for a place to start or even restart their programs at this point. Mm-hmm. And we're talking to them very deeply about selecting one proof of concept that you can build your entire program around. Any reactions to that?
Yeah, I think for sure having that tangible use case to test your framework against is key. I think of that as sort of the bottoms up approach. I think another element to that is the top-down sort of structure, right, of which the stakeholder ownership and whether it's a council or a steering group or what have you are key to making sure that you have the right people at the table. If you're a larger organization, if you're public, you might have second line function, you might have third line function, so oversight, audit, things like that. Ensuring that you understand what their roles and responsibilities are, that they understand what their roles and responsibilities are important. And then also, what are you anchoring that all to? So you mentioned CrossCountry. Of course, we have our own sort of bespoke AI model, if you will, but a lot of it is anchored to standards like NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have an AI risk management framework. ISO also has a relatively new AI framework. The EU has published some AI guidance that is valuable if you're international or you're doing work in the EU. Other countries have as well. And then on the more technical side, if you have in-house development or you have offensive security teams, red teams, MITRE has a great new addition to ATT&CK, which is MITRE Atlas. The Open Web Application OWASP group has also come out with a view, and then Maestro is a third from a threat modeling perspective. So there's lots of different frameworks out there. Certainly they will continue to evolve and change over time. But if anything, I feel like we're all going to be moving into a more agile space where we will be going through sprints and just continuing to evolve. We had a client recently share that it's like building the plane while it's flying in the air. And I think that's a really great analogy because like you said, every client is already starting from some position, whether they know it or not. Like likely most of our clients have third parties and vendors that are already adding AI components. And if your third party risk process doesn't incorporate questions like that yet, you should. But I think whether we all know it or not, AI is here to stay. It's just a matter of kind of turning those dials and understanding what they're doing and what they're connected to and trying to ensure that that's driving value versus driving up risk.
Okay, so I love some of the concepts you're hitting on. So one of the things we've been talking to the clients about recently is just, 18 to 24 month roadmaps are dead. The technology, even just in the past year, has changed so much and gets better every day and stronger every day. So your point about agility is so important. And that goes for risk and governance frameworks, that goes for value proposition, that goes for the tools that you're going to pick. And it's just staying attuned to all of that. And we stood up a lab at CrossCountry to be able to enable our consultants with this knowledge and to do the research constantly so that they can take it to our clients and really show them, here is the latest and greatest, here is how you should think about your roadmap, here's how you should think about, the next 6 months. And, maybe for our viewers out there, I don't want everyone to think that, we're not going to govern you to death, or we are not going to try to slow your program down. What we will do is take these frameworks, show you the agile way to implement them, get you up and running on that proof of concept, show you how you can do it, manage the change through a transformation and change management office, put all of those internal structures in place so that you can move faster. And that's part of the maybe go a little bit slow to go fast at the beginning, is standing that up quickly and with velocity, getting you to understand why those frameworks make sense, and then you can run and take off with some of your program. Any reaction to that?
No, I think that's just right. I think the other thing is organizations out there already have policies and they have procedures and they have compliance functions. They're already starting from a place of whether it's compliance or just understanding what their risks are. We have to blend our approach to where our clients are at today to help them achieve the scale and, I guess, velocity of where they're trying to go in a way that's both measured, with what the risks are, but also with the opportunities that AI presents.
Absolutely. Okay, so one of the next things that I wanted to get into with you, Cameron, is, we've talked a lot about the foundational steps here. So we got the value alignment covered. We've dug deep into kind of the foundational risk and governance frameworks you should think about. And we're starting to move forward into, okay, what are the problems we're trying to solve and how are we going to solve them? And, one of the things that we're encouraging our clients to look at very closely is, what do you already own? So, if we're looking at a build versus buy scenario, let's build off of what we already have. And then there's this kind of in-between step where there are plug-and-play tools that go very deep and solve one problem and have all the machine learning kind of built around that problem, whether it be invoice to pay is a really good example where we've seen some of that come out at scale. So we do a lot around getting our clients to think through what vendors are out there, what problems there are to solve in those spaces, and why you may want to select either one of those things or a combination of all three to kind of solve that end-to-end process or value stream problem that we talked about at the outset of the call. So I know you have a lot of thoughts on vendor frameworks, selection, some of the risks that you take on when you engage these third parties. I was hoping you could share some of that.
Yeah, there's a lot there. If you watch the news, you've probably heard stories of a couple of different large-scale vendors that very often our clients have a sense that some of these vendors are too big to fail, right? But even look at AWS's outage yesterday, which affected everyone that has a smartphone and uses like any of hundreds of applications. We're so interconnected. And so some of these large vendors have had issues with some of their vendors, nth party vendors that are feeding into them. And many vendors are using AI potentially without clients' knowledge. And so you may be finding out through, hopefully, your third-party risk process which of these vendors are using AI, but you may already have a policy where you don't want it used. However, it's already coming in through some of these products. So I think it's important to make sure that from a business line perspective, you understand what tools and technologies they're currently using and that they want to be using. What does their pipeline look like from an investment and advancement perspective? Like, what is their AI strategy, if you will? I do think and hope that your vendors that you're using are doing things like proactive pen testing, red teaming, really, which is acting like sophisticated attackers and essentially trying to break their own tools so that those don't have to happen at your client's expense. And then similarly, organizations through their third-party risk process, to an extent, need to bring some of these into their own labs and make sure that it works within as intended, that the outcomes are intended, that to the extent it may always be necessary to have human in the loop for these processes. Your point on single pane of glass and having that monitoring, it should be monitoring not only for the alarm, but also like the integrity of the data. Does the data still mean what it was meant to mean? Is the confidentiality of that data the same as someone got into it? And is it available? Are there issues with downstream vendors or even within your own systems where you can no longer get to that information? So it's just a massive space to, I think it's opportunity for these different groups to kind of step up and really become more advanced in order to support the opportunity that AI brings.
There's so much to think about here and so much wild coordination that is needed. So developing that program and resisting the urge where we've seen this in the field is just, the scattershot approach to LLMs. And I saw this a little bit. I was previously the U.S. firm controller at PwC, where I led some of our digital transformation efforts, particularly in the back office. And we had rolled out citizen-led kind of automation at that time with some various desktop automation tools, some data visualization tools, and bot building. I didn't have anybody that could recode it. I didn't have any way to maintain it. So it didn't really sequentially do much, and it didn't provide me any value as far as reallocating my resources somewhere. And this isn't that, isn't it? And I would just say it's not. Like some of the technology, the underlying technology here, with its ability to understand, to learn, to then recreate content, is something that we haven't seen before. Harnessing that couldn't be more important. So a citizen-led program is very tough to imagine how much innovation is going on the ground without seeing the light of day, which is why you have to have a programmatic approach, which is why we're talking about command centers and governance and other things. How do you bring these things to the surface and get visibility to them while still encouraging some of the innovation? And we want people playing with these tools. We want them all learning all of these concepts, the dangers, but also like the wild efficiency and value that you can create if you think deeply about how to solve these problems, or if you just bring together a community that wants to solve them. So lots to think about from that perspective. I don't know if anything I said there, Cameron, resonated with you.
Yeah, I think one of the worst things that we could do or that our clients could do is use AI as a solution looking for a problem. I think it's important to understand, one, what the strategy of the organization is. So if you have a 3 or a 5 year strategy, what are the inputs and outputs of that strategy? How do you harness the potential of that strategy by utilizing AI tools or technologies or concepts to drive that in a way that's maybe more efficient, but also drives the value of the employees? And so maybe less so of a headcount play, which I think a lot of people have been frightened about, and more so about how are you leveling up all of those individuals in their own functions to maybe operate at a higher level. And I don't mean higher level in terms of arm's length, but just in a way that elevates their role and the opportunity for them to work in a, I guess, more integrated fashion to drive more innovation, but also, as you mentioned, the opportunity that these agents and other technologies have to move forward that function.
Yeah, so I like what you're saying there about the working together. And one of the things that we used to do was really just bring a cross-functional team into a room with a big problem or kind of like a big idea in mind. And, everyone out of their day job for 5 days, let's just take a week. We called it a dash, not even a sprint. But lock them in a room with the technologists, with the business folks, with the owner of the process, and break it down. And you'd be surprised at what kind of value you could elicit from just that approach. But there's some very smart people that if you get them working together, they can build and think bigger about these things versus just kind of the lone wolf approach to kind of prompting a way to, send a faster email, something like that. The other thing you said I think is super important. So we're talking about all this foundation you put in place, and there's a lot to do there to get into this program, going slow to go fast. So if you're making that kind of investment and you're going to spend all of the time thinking about the value alignment, the alignment to strategy, all the foundational, all of the risk frameworks that you talked about putting in place, everyone getting trained up on kind of the risks and opportunities of this, then isn't there the opportunity to think bigger and about the value proposition and going for a use case that involves a cross-functional team and solves a strategic problem for big value? And I think you'd be surprised at how much value you could create, versus just solving a couple hour kind of, manual nuance. So it's good to start small. It's good to think about what some of those things are so that you can get attuned to what the technology does. But there are big problems to solve out there that can really help you activate your strategy. So one of the concepts, Cameron, that I brought up earlier was we were going back to the command center. We're watching for the blinking red light as far as when controls were being violated or policies were coming off track or agents are acting nefariously, whatever it is that you would want to continuously monitor. And it gets into kind of the concept of anomaly detection around data sets. But really from a pure experience perspective, being a previous controller, I wanted to see that blinking red light. Mm-hmm. So what do you believe are some of the keys and the roadmap to actually achieving that and getting there?
Yeah, so I think not surprisingly, it starts with having good, verifiable, and trusted data. So I think you have to start from a place where you have good data. And in some organizations, different functions may be in a better space for that up front than others. So you may have a data-first organization or one that the general kind of technology IQ of the organization is higher. You may have one where their financial space is much more evolved than others. And so you may have to start from that position of strength to identify what does good data look like, what are those use case opportunities, as you mentioned before, and then work your way towards a good dashboard from there. And I would say, too, you may need more than one view on your dashboard. There might be different groups and different stakeholder groups that are looking to see different views into that, right? Different angles to maybe the same or similar problem, to achieving the ROI or to managing the risk or to monitoring compliance. And so I would say, similar to that crawl, walk, run concept we talked about earlier, it's starting from where the organization has strength and working with those stakeholders and building off of that where the opportunity is identified in alignment with strategy, which we were talking about earlier. And then I would say for my risk and compliance folks out there too, it's understanding what mechanisms you have available to monitor the risks and controls. And so similar to that, seeing a red or an orange flag, what does that look like? How has a policy or control been breached or a threshold surpassed? Maybe there's even a play in there for risk appetite, and have you exceeded that from both a strategic and a risk point of view? There's even an enterprise risk management conversation in there somewhere as well. But I do think it's acknowledging where the organization has strengths and weaknesses. And I think even the ownership of AI, which we talked about earlier, is in there too. I think one of the reasons that we're seeing that ownership vary is because you're going with where the strength of leadership is too. The person that owns AI needs to understand the balance of both the risk and the opportunity. And understand kind of what that overall strategy is. So I would never tell a client, it must be owned by the chief risk officer or it must be owned by the CISO. I think it really depends on who's in those roles and what the overall plan for AI is for that organization.
So one of the things that I've noticed about some of our client work, especially those that are looking to kind of stand up their first proof of concept or even just driving their strategic program in general around AI, is that we start down the path of identifying use cases or processes or problems to solve, and we quickly gravitate to the data is not in a position to be able to activate some of the AI that they're looking for, or even automation. So, one of the taglines that we have shared in the past is, if you can't produce BI, you're probably not ready for AI, and I think that applies to what we're saying about the condition of your data sets now.
In addition to that, I would say if you can't continuously monitor from a cyber risk perspective the BI or the AI, you probably shouldn't do either of those things.
Great tip. Love it. Thank you. Okay, Cameron. So with a CFO as a customer, I'm thinking about when we're going into model design and getting into, rolling out what an agent framework would look like. I'm thinking very much from a risk and governance perspective about auditability and SOX compliance. Like those are the things that are top of mind for me as somebody who sat in the finance seat for a while, and just making sure those are complied with. But holistically, just what is the whole pie that the audience could understand about what to think about from a risk and governance framework perspective?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So we have a unique perspective, what we call the responsible AI principles. They really do encompass areas across cybersecurity, privacy, data governance, transparency, really leveraging sort of the best of breed across a number of frameworks, as well as standards and regulations. And those really can be fitted to each organization depending upon really what matters the most. So to your point, if it's SOX or another compliance framework, or whether it's led by another principle, we do find that it is holistic, as well as scalable to each of our clients.
Okay. So scalability is very important, and it's been important from the standpoint of what we've seen a lot of our CFOs come back to say, hey, either my CEO or my board is asking me about what my AI strategy is. And I don't know where to start. I don't know how to get started. I don't know how to put some of those kind of foundations in place. And, oftentimes what we hear, and that's where they're looking for the use case because they want to check the box and respond to the ask without thinking about the scalable program. So how are you thinking about governance from the highest level, from the board level, from the CEO level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a good place to start is the risk appetite statement. So I think organizations that have a RAS can review what those risks are. Their board certainly knows what they are. Their risk committees know what they are. Hopefully, if AI is not on the list yet, it gets added because I think it is a measurable risk, but also opportunity. I think you're hearing a lot of excitement, but also a lot of concern. And so it's finding the balance of those, hopefully in a quantifiable way, which I know can be tricky, but it goes back to where you have good data, right? And where you have the right teams at the forefront and leveraging those where possible to grow in both efficiency and maturity.
So Cameron, it never ceases to amaze me just the level of expertise you have around this stuff, and given your background, it's very clear as to why you think about this all very deeply, and your experience is unmatched. So I really wanted to just thanks for being here and for spending time with us. And this is really that opportunity to highlight the kind of talent that we have at CrossCountry, people like yourself, and looking forward to future episodes. So hopefully you learned something here today. I certainly did, and always do when I spend time with Cameron. And we got into some very deep data governance concepts and data strategy concepts here. And I would like to use that to kind of propel the next phase of this and our next podcast, which will be on those topics. And we'll bring our data transformation analytics leaders to the table and put them to the test to see how they can help you, and talk about what's going on in the market and what those trends are, and how you can think about setting data as the baseline for your AI strategy. But thank you so much for spending time with us, and hope you enjoyed this, and we'll continue this series and share our insights with the market. So thanks, and have a great day.